relationship and sex feature.
Relationship issues,
Relationship talk.
on 702.
And today we're having a conversation about using sex as an outlet. We know that sex can be a quick fix for emotional, physical, or intimate comfort, right? It can relieve stress, anxiety, because you're triggering the release of that feel-good hormone. In fact, there are a few of those hormones that promote relaxation and can help reduce levels of stress. However, sex becomes an unhealthy coping mechanism when it's used to intentionally distract yourself from your emotions by using it as an outlet. So this means you are relying on sexual activity as a way to release emotions, whether it's tension, whether it's stress or other feelings. Essentially, you're using sex as a coping mechanism to feel better. And that's what we're talking about. And yes, maybe it provides some relief for you. But if it is done excessively or in unhealthy ways, it can lead to potential issues, even relationship problems, or you end up feeling guilty. You could deal with a potential diagnosis of sex addiction. I want you to join this conversation and share your experiences with us. Maybe you found yourself really using sex as an outlet. Maybe you've found yourself turning to sex or even porn after an upsetting event or after a stressful occasion or after you felt a particular emotion. Do you use sex as a way to feel good and not just for pleasure and intimacy? You can give us a call to share your thoughts on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Dr. Eve is a clinical sexologist, couple and sex therapist, family therapist, and trauma therapist joining us in studio. This is the perfect person to have a conversation with about these kind of issues. And thank you so much, Dr. Eve, for making time for us. It's good to see you.
Wow, Clement, this is so exciting. I can see you. Usually I sit in the studio.
And you're all alone.
I got wonderful tech support.
Yeah.
But here I can see you. Makes it such a richer conversation. So thank you for inviting me to be here. As you say, it's a multi-layered situation, and I do want to just put some caveats in place to protect our listeners and also to be able to be transparent about how I work. I do work in the DPATH model, which means deep pathology in sexual behavior. So we're not here to judge any behavior or to pathologize any kind of behavior. We want it to be almost like a safe space, which all your spaces are actually, for people to come in where they're not going to be judged. Also, all of my work is done through a trauma-informed lens, as you well know. And also, this is a trigger warning for anyone who is listening to us today, because our conversation is going to contain information about trauma, childhood sexual abuse, and sexual behaviors that may trigger listeners. So I love always to be able to warn people and to say, take care of yourself and, find somebody to chat with or just to come back in an hour's time. But we do obviously want to get you to participate. So why do people love to be sexual, and what is the purpose, and why do we want to even go into that space with people, which can be kind of high risk especially in our country. So let's do a little bit of neuroscience and a little bit of physiological explanation of what happens to people when they go through the different phases of desire and feeling aroused and becoming orgasmic. There are a number of hormones that really dictate this experience for us, which motivates us. We're motivated mainly by the hormone called dopamine, which is a motivating hormone, seeks out reward for us, and is a big drive to be able to seek out some kind of pleasure, a whole lot of pleasure. And sexuality is one of the easy ways that we can find pleasure. We also have two other really important hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin, which are very present during sexual activity or feelings of arousal and orgasm. Oxytocin is known as the love hormone, and anyone who's more interested in that, I refer you to the work of Sue Carter, who has done magnificent work, magnificent research into oxytocin and how it really plays an important part in feelings of what we call love. And vasopressin is the sense of bonding that we have with people. So if you think about that, what it is that we as humans really long for, We long to feel connected. We long to feel bonded. And you can even see me now. We long to be able to feel touch, and we long to be able to feel the containment of being seen by others. So imagine if you're a young child and you are not being seen, you're not being touched, and you're not getting that. And you discover either through some form of childhood sexual abuse, where there is an association that is formed for you around sexual arousal and being seen and being touched and felt cared for and felt very, very loved by somebody in a kind of crazy way, that becomes part of your template, and that's going to be one of your driving forces to associate sexuality with a certain amount of emotional experience that I'm having at a particular time. When you're in that situation, you're not taught as a child to be able to manage emotions that are difficult for you. Unfortunately, many parents are not equipped due to circumstances to be able to really give children the attention of managing, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling hungry, I'm feeling scared. And so they don't learn to manage emotions. And as a result of that, we seek for other adaptive mechanisms to try and make us feel better. And sexuality is going to be an easy one. So we either have got a template around sexual abuse and what that feels like for us as a soothing mechanism, or else we have neglect trauma where we feel abandoned, and therefore we learn to self-soothe through self-touching. So we understand that sexuality feels fantastic. There is no pathologizing, there is no judgment around it. It's more around how do we use it, and I'm going to kind of move away from your word, which is commonly used, which is healthy and unhealthy. I rather like to reference safety or unsafe. What makes us feel safe? What makes us feel unsafe? Those are determinants we want to be using in this conversation to say, are we using sexuality to self-medicate or to be able to feel safe with somebody? And how do we actually know when we're feeling safe? And we'll come to looking at what stress is, what happens when we feel a certain way, and what happens to us in that state in our nervous system that we then turn to sexuality, which may be harmful to us and to others.
Yeah. Thank you so much for introducing it like that and just laying the foundation like that, Dr. Eve. So let's then maybe look at the psychological and emotional factors that contribute to us using sex as an outlet. What is it, when you're explaining what makes us feel so safe, what makes us feel so unsafe, what is it, what are some of the examples you can give our listeners to, so they can know whether or not, because sometimes people don't know, right? They think, oh, but it's just something that I like to do when after conflict or after I feel this kind of emotion. How do they assess whether they actually use it as a self-medicating mechanism?
Yeah, even in a way that is feeling safe for both people, for whoever's involved. Okay, so we're going to look at what stress is, again, from a neuroscience point of view. And we live, all of us, in what's called a continuum of stress. We start out with feeling, if you think about a situation, I'm going to take your running as an example, just because. Can I?
Yes, please.
It's fine. So think about when you first start running, and you then begin to run a little further, and you run a little further, and you begin to what's called stretch. You begin to stretch yourself into different kinds of marathons or different kinds of challenges that you set for yourself. So you set new patterns of behavior for yourself, and you begin to feel like really proud of yourself. You have a feeling of, oh wow, I'm really appreciating how I'm really feeling amazing as I keep stretching and I keep stretching. And you move into what's called your ventral vagal nervous system, which means I'm feeling safe with myself. I'm beginning to trust myself. I'm able to manage this feeling of being stretched, which can be a difficult kind of emotion. But then, how do you know when stretching becomes too stretching? And then you begin to experience stress. So you may have feelings of, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And we really look at 6 different primal emotions that people begin to know when they are really feeling stressed. That is, I'm feeling mad, which means angry. I'm feeling bad, which means I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling bored, I'm feeling lonely, and I'm feeling physically hungry. And when you begin to notice that, that's called I'm feeling stress. I'm no longer stretching, but I'm feeling stressed. And I don't feel safe any longer. So what do? What have I always done? well, I might have always masturbated and got onto porn. I might have always just kind of gone and got a whole lot drunk, hooked up with somebody, and that relieved those feelings of stress that I was having in my body. But then it becomes like a habitual pattern, and it becomes the only way that I deal with stressed feelings inside of me. And then I find that I'm kind of going down that rabbit hole, and it becomes the way that my whole world is actually structured around being able to be sexual, to be able to access sex in different ways. I begin to engage in risky sexual behavior. I begin to engage in non-consensual sexual behavior, and I find I'm hurting myself and others. And suddenly we're in this survival mode where this is the only way that your body knows how to function. And it becomes a very difficult situation for people where they then get diagnosed, and we'll come back to diagnostics just now. They get diagnosed as being mentally ill with compulsive sexual behavior or porn addiction or sexual addiction, and then they become framed in a very pathological, medicalized model and never really get to looking at how can I healthily, I'm coming to your word now, and I'll tell you why, use sexuality. What would constitute safe sexuality for me? How do I change my pattern so that I can enjoy and have pleasure with sexuality in an adaptive way rather than a maladaptive way? I've said a whole lot there.
No, but it makes a lot of sense.
A little overwhelming.
Yeah, please elaborate more on the diagnosis.
Okay. I started out by saying I use a depathologizing model. So many people, it's so interesting always for me, Clement, when people will come in and say, I'm a sex addict. I'm going to Sex Addicts Anonymous, like Alcoholics Anonymous, or I'm a porn addict and have a real medical problem. And the partner may even be feeling really comfortable with it because they think, my partner's sick, they're getting treatment, and that's a good thing, because there's so many different institutions that offer treatment for sex addiction, so-called sex addiction. But actually, if we look at the DSM-5, which I'm sure you're very familiar with at this stage, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health that all clinicians refer to, there is absolutely no diagnostic term. There is no diagnosis for compulsive sexual behavior at all. There is no diagnosis from a medical or a mental health point of view for porn addiction either. What we do know, this is part of a compulsive or an impulse control disorder, but it's not a compulsive sexual behavior problem. There is enough research that's been done to be able to say this isn't part of that. And in fact, the ICD-11, the new ICD-11, the World Health Organization, the International Classification of Diseases, have defined compulsive sexual behavior disorder as an impulse control disorder. So it's a lack of impulses. So we're coming back to the body, and how we work with it is to be able to treat the body, how to manage difficult, stressful emotions so that you don't reach out for sexuality to be able to be your self-medication. We learn how to manage emotions that make you feel mad, bad, sad, lonely, bored, or physically hungry. But it's not a judgment and a pathologizing of you as somebody who is an addict.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I've got some questions coming through here, Dr. Eve, that I want us to get to. So we're going to take a quick ad break. It's 22 minutes after 11 o'clock. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation we're having about using sex as an outlet. Are you a person that's found that you have been going to sex as a self-medicating mechanism? Self-medication happens when, as a person, you're turning to maybe prescription drugs or illegal drugs or alcohol or sex to deal with situations or maybe hateful feelings or stress or particular emotions. What's been your experience? Or maybe you've got a partner who responds to situations like that where they want to use sex as an outlet. If you've got any question as well, maybe you're confused about something regarding this topic, Dr. Eve is here to take your questions and also just offer some advice on how you can deal with particular issues if there's one issue you want to deal with your partner with regards to this topic. So how do you do that? You can call us on 011-883-0702. Your WhatsApp's on 072-702.
Relationship issues
Relationship Talk
on 702.
It's 26 minutes after 11 o'clock on our relationship and sex feature this morning. We've got Dr. Eve, who's a clinical sexologist, who's guiding us through this conversation about using sex as an outlet. Is that what you do? And what do you use it as an outlet of? What emotions often drive you to want to maybe have sex? We are taking your calls. We're taking your WhatsApps as well. I've got some questions here, Dr. Eve, that I want us to go through maybe before we get to the headlines. So the first one is, hi Clement, please can you ask Dr. Eve there, I have often found that sex is not only for pleasure. I have used sex as a form of emotional release, whether I'm upset or sometimes when I'm just too excited or when I'm anxious, and it often helps for me. So is it then fair to say that is unhealthy, or is it okay to have sex as pleasure but also have it as a form of emotional release? The second question comes from Tabo, who says, hi Clement, please ask Dr. Eve about when do we know it's unsafe? I used to masturbate until I hurt myself. So would you consider that then an addiction? Because you're saying that you can't really diagnose that. What would that then mean for this person?
Great questions. Clement, what I'm going to do is just read a definition so people really get to understand what compulsive sexual behavior is. So it's a phenomenon characterized by a persistent failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses or urges, resulting in repetitive sexual behavior that causes marked distress or impairment in personal, familial, social, educational, or occupational areas of functioning. So that's really important. I kind of want to repeat it so people understand. It's a persistent failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses or urges, and it results in repetitive sexual behavior that causes marked distress, and that's always the important thing, the impact of it, the distress that it causes to you, and the impairment that it causes in your personal, familial, social, educational, occupational areas of functioning. So using that as a definition, I invite the listeners to then really not pathologize themselves, but to be able to discriminate the difference between, is it causing you distress? Is it causing you disruption, disequilibrium into your life? Do you feel that there are these urges? What are the urges for? Is it an urge for releasing tension, as the one listener said? Is it unsafe? I masturbated, I hurt myself. I mean, what is your payoff? What would be the purpose of you hurting yourself? What is it that you're really longing for in that situation? Why would you be doing that to yourself? So if we look at that as a definition, that must be a repetitive behavior that you're doing to actually do that. Also, it means very time consuming to get to a point where you're really going to actually be hurting yourself. So it would be causing impairment into other areas of your life. So I would say that there are other emotions that are going on for you that you could probably manage in a different way to be able to get the releasing that you're longing for. The first person who's saying, I'm using it for emotional release, I mean, I don't think there is a better sleeping pill in the world than being orgasmic, right? There's just nothing that's going to put you to sleep because of all the incredible hormones and endorphins that are going to flow through your body at that time, bringing you into ventral vagal relaxation, calm, feeling safe, feeling connected, feeling good. So we are not here in any way to undermine masturbation and undermine sexuality. We're looking at when it becomes something which is repetitive and harmful and you don't feel you have any control. Also, and I did my show last night with Aubrey on consent, which is really, really difficult. Is there consent in your sexual activity that you are engaging in? You really want to think about that.
Yeah. And one of the questions Dr. Eve is also asking is, have you been diagnosed as a sex addict, perhaps? Do you think you are addicted to sex or porn? You can join this conversation. Give us a call or send a WhatsApp voice note. We'll go back to those messages and questions after the headlines. It's
Relationship issues
Relationship Talk.
on 702.
24 minutes before 12 o'clock. On our relationship feature this morning, we've been talking about using sex as an outlet or using sex as self-medication. Perhaps you are turning to sex because of the feelings you may, or because of a situation you've been through. Maybe you're feeling hurt, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling emotional, you're using sex as an outlet. Is that what you do? I've got some great questions here, Dr. Eve, on our WhatsApp line. A few of them, so maybe let me ask them one by one so we don't lose track. So the first one is using masturbation to sleep unhealthy?
So I focus so much on consent always. If you're doing it, on your own, where are you doing? If you're in a partnership, is it something that you do next to your partner? If he, she, or they agree to having you masturbate in bed next to them, or you can go to the privacy of another room, or shower, or a bed, or a bathroom. What are the context around it? But it absolutely is a fantastic sleeping pill, as I said, if that's something that you are doing. And in fact, for men, we know that they live longer if they have frequent ejaculations. There hasn't been done a lot of research in that for women, of course not, but we know for men it absolutely helps to keep kind of releasing prostaglandin and to get the prostate kind of working frequently. So masturbation is really healthy.
And then another question from Anonymous says, good afternoon, Clement and Dr. Eve. Please, can you ask Dr. Eve, what is the impact psychologically and emotionally on someone who is no longer happy in a relationship, but for whatever reason, they won't leave the other person and they continue to have sex with them occasionally, even when love is no longer part of the occasion? And also, what is the consequence of having intimate relations with that person that you no longer completely trust or really love to even have a holistic sexual experience with?
I'm going to blame it on the hormones. That's unfortunately what happens when two people kind of are sexual. There is that bonding, the vasopressin gets kicked in, the oxytocin, the feeling of love gets kicked in. And that's why it feels really, really difficult for people to leave each other, because the hormones make you feel like you need to be there. Your body kind of feels a sense of loss because there's no more of that vasopressin releasing. And I'm pleased that this person is able to feel or to recognize that this isn't a safe situation for them to be in, that you want to be wondering, what would be the purpose of still continuing to be sexual with this person? What is it in you that drives you to still want to be there? Is it just because your body is feeling, the attachment, the bonding is there? But I'm pleased that they recognize that this isn't a safe situation, because where there isn't trust, there's no safety in a relationship.
And someone is also mentioning self-esteem and self-worth, and how for them that seems to be what plays a role in seeking sexual behavior as an emotional escape. Is there a connection there?
Big sigh, Clement, because I think many people use sexuality to bolster their sense of self or their sense of attractiveness, sense of self-esteem, also maybe around status. It's also almost an antidote to those feelings of loneliness and being able to be seen. So is that a safe situation for you? I would think that it would be kind of normal for many people, because not all of us have very secure attachments, and therefore seeking out people to be sexual can for the moment feel fantastic. But afterwards we know that the dip is bigger and longer, and therefore the hit needs to be there, the dopamine hit again, which gets us into the compulsive cycle. Well, I kind of still feel lonely, mad, bad, sad, and bored, so I need to have another hit, and I'm going to turn to sexuality. It's always for me so cringy in a way when couples come in and I have somebody saying, it could be male or female, it doesn't matter in which situation it is, I need to be sexual with my partner. My partner needs to be giving me more sex. And, it's like kind of this, and you can see me like with the fist and with the bracing of I need to, and then I recognize that there is something else that is going on there, that they're looking at sexuality as a way to be able to manage feelings that are really difficult. Those feelings of being lonely or disconnected from a partner, and the demand and the pressure is on the partner. I need you to be more sexual with me. And then the work really begins,
And speaking of the disconnection from a partner, can using sex as an outlet impact on their ability to form a deep emotional connection? So how can a relationship like that be affected, right? When when you're in an intimate relationship, but there's that thing that exists where sex is constantly being used as an outlet, what impact does it have on that connection?
It leads to lack of safety and distrust. So I have an algorithm that I work with in my therapy room. It's like people will come in and say, well, I need to have more sexuality, or I have no sex desire, or get my partner to be on the same page as me sexually. And it's always, well, okay, let's put that aside. And the work is, how do we develop a sense of intimacy? Once we have a sense of intimacy and safety, we feel connected with each other. Once we feel connected with each other, meaning we feel safe with each other, we've got more cues of safety rather than cues of danger with each other. Sexuality is going to happen naturally, consensually, where there is feeling of connection with the other person. I feel safe with you now because we have we've moved aside, I want the sex. It could be rather, I want to feel loved, I want to feel safer with you, I want to feel more time with you, I want to feel seen by you, I want to feel heard by you. And once we can get that connection going, naturally people are just sexual with each other. I mean, it's quite profound what I do witness in my therapy room when we actually take the sexuality out and we focus on how do we just kind of, like we are doing with each other right now, how do we just kind of gaze at each other, how do we just hold each other's hands, have the absolute power of, the somatic connection, holding each other's hands. And then the sexuality kind of just fades away, and they naturally and organically, when they feel seen and feel heard, sexuality is going to happen. It's going to happen in a very much more organic way than pressurizing somebody. You know, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. Ooh, so how do you then begin the work of just realizing that, okay, I'm using sex as an outlet, and I need to start focusing on what the reasons are? To your point about people are quick to say, oh, maybe I'm addicted to sex, maybe I'm addicted to pornography, and they're not really asking the key questions of what lies behind. So people listening to us now and thinking, I identify with what Dr. Eve is saying. I do realize that often when I feel this way, when I'm made to feel this way, I use sex as an outlet. What work do they begin to do?
So what I'm going to turn to is to get people to question themselves. Now, this is based on a model which was designed by Michael Vigoretto and Doug Braun-Harvey. And they wrote a seminal book a number of years ago called Treating Out of Control Sexual Behavior, Rethinking Sex Addiction. And what they propose is a sexual health foundation, which they use with men. They have male groups all the time to be able to work with men, because it's more common that men either say or men either do more compulsive sexual behaviors. And these are the principles. And so I'm going to invite the listeners to think about these principles. There are 6 principles which they say are necessary for sexual health. So number 1 is consent. Number 2 is non-exploitation of the other person. Number 3 is their protection from STIs and unintended pregnancies. Number 4 is their honesty with this person. Number 5, do we share values? And number 6, most importantly as well, do we have mutual pleasure? So the pleasure isn't only mine, that I need to be sexual, but there is a connection with somebody else where I recognize, in order for me to have safe, they call it healthy sexual behavior, there are consent. I'm not exploiting you. I'm not taking advantage of you. I'm not using my kink to influence or to pressure or to manipulate you into doing the same kind of thing that I want. That there is protection. There is STI protection, pregnancy, we take that into consideration. There's honesty. We share the same values around honesty and safety. And there's mutual pleasure. I'm invested in you as much as you are invested in me to have pleasure. And if these 6 principles are not observed, they find that they worked with these principles with men who were brought into them for treatment for compulsive sexual behaviors, and they found that this was a fantastic model that actually got men to rethink sexuality and how do we actually use sexuality according to these principles.
All right, it's now going up to 30 minutes before 12 o'clock. Let's go to some more questions here. I've got a message from Anonymous, who says, hi Dr. Eve, I have a question here. Is it healthy to masturbate as soon as you finished having sex because it's become a new norm for me. Should I be worried about that?
Let's go back to the principles. If there is consent with you and a partner, if you're not exploiting your partner by making her, him, or they participate in it with you, if there's protection with pregnancy or sexual health, if there's some honesty around it, if you both share or you all share the value around it and there's mutual pleasure in it, there is no right or wrong around what one should be doing sexually. What we really are wanting to tease out is the difference between people who do suffer enormous suffering around obsessive compulsive sexual behavior, enormous suffering for them and for people all around them, and behavior that we want to normalize it. We want to be able to say this is safe. If this is your pattern and you're getting pleasure and there's consent, or there is no secrecy, or there is just what pleases you, why not? We do not have to follow the linear the model of like, this is how sex has to happen between people. It can be circular, it can be anything you want, as long as those principles are observed, that there is honesty, there is consent, there is mutuality that is happening. That creates safety and trust and commitment and passion between people. So be creative with it.
Yeah. And then another one says, T says, Clement, I have a partner who gets aroused when she gets super stressed. Is that healthy?
We can use the same principles. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's like that's the best antidote. Okay, when you're super stressed, as long as you're complicit in it, as long as there is no coercion on your part, as long as there's no pressure on your part, as long as there's a negotiation around it, then that's great. Those principles have to be observed. We want that there should always be consent and respect to create safety around it. It's a wonderful releasing when you have all those endorphins, dopamine, vasopressin, oxytocin being released into your bloodstream. I mean, that's why people want to be sexual, because it feels so fabulous.
Okay. And then there's another one here. It says, hi, Clement. I know this may not be related specifically to this topic, but I used to be sexually addicted, but now I'm no longer interested into sex, and it's giving more stress. I don't even have feelings for my wife anymore, and I'm concerned about that. That's Knox in Midrand, who says that he feels that he used to be addicted to sex and he's no longer interested in it anymore, to a point that it's even affecting the intimacy with his wife.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. What happens is there is a disassociation. It sounds like there's a disassociation, a disembodiment from your sexual part, because it has maybe brought you the pathologizing of addiction, or maybe you've gone into treatment for it, or it's become something so shameful and guilty for you that you don't know how to be sexual safely anymore. You're not maybe trusting yourself, and so you've just completely cut it out of your life. And obviously that's going to be affecting your intimacy, unless you have an agreement with your partner that you move into a sexless relationship. But I would really get you to go into some therapy to be able to find a way to reclaim that part of yourself in a way that feels safe for you.
Yeah. Okay. It's 9 minutes now before 12 o'clock. We're going to take this quick ad break. When we come back, we're going to take some more questions from you. You can call if you want to on 011-883-0702. If you prefer to send a WhatsApp voice note or a text, you can do that on 072-702-1702.
Relationship issues
Relationship talk.
on 702.
Right, it's 7 minutes now before 12 o'clock. Let's continue with more of your questions coming through on 072-702-1702 as we continue this conversation with Dr. Eve about using sex as an outlet, as self-medication. We've received a number of questions from some of you, some inputs from some of you who say, one person said their partner, whenever they are so stressed, they are aroused. And they wanted to know if that is healthy or not. What's the situation in your relationship? How are you navigating what can really be complex feelings sometimes around this issue? Dr. Eve, there's someone who has sent us a message here and says, hi, Clement and Dr. Eve, I've realized that I use sex as an outlet, And I realized, though, that immediately after that sexual activity, I have feelings of loneliness, I have feelings of emptiness and dissatisfaction, and I'm often filled with a lot of regret, even though in the moment before I do the sexual activity as an outlet, the urge is so strong that I feel like it's going to help me feel better.
Love that. Really thank you for that courageous message. If you were in my therapy room, I'd work with you around the urge. That's such a powerful statement. The urge is so strong. I wonder what that urge is for. And it's interesting that the first thing that she or they said was loneliness, outlet for loneliness. Because that is, the most awful feeling to have, that empty, hollow feeling of being lonely. And again, the sexuality is a connection with somebody. I've said this to you before. I'm going to repeat it because I think it's worth repeating. That what the research shows us, that neglect trauma of neglect, which is abandonment, invisibility, of not being seen, is worse, has a worse impact on human beings than childhood sexual abuse. And people always think, how's that? That's kind of a crazy thing. What could be worse than childhood sexual abuse? But with childhood sexual abuse, you're actually getting somebody to look at you. You're feeling less lonely. You're probably coming from a neglected household, and therefore you are quite vulnerable to a predator. So when you are neglected and you're invisible and you're abandoned and you feel so alone, that is the most traumatic experience. So if this person is feeling that lonely, reaching out for sexual connection, it's reaching out to avoid that feeling of actually being lonely, and therefore the experience afterwards is going to feel way worse, because I'm still not getting that hollow, empty feeling of just being contained and safe. It's so temporary, it's so momentary, and I feel awful afterwards. I feel even more lonely.
Yeah. And then how can then people build a healthier relationship with sex and intimacy, especially those that have used it as an escape?
How do you build I think it's more around building a healthy relationship with yourself. Because I work with, through a trauma-informed lens, it would really be looking at how to develop a relationship with maybe parts of yourself that have been wounded, that have been injured as children, where you haven't felt safe, or where there was childhood sexual abuse that has happened to you, or violations of some kind of agreements that you have with adults. And that's where I would start. And organically, as I said earlier, the relationship with sexuality would change as you have a different kind of relationship with yourself. And you find other adaptive mechanisms of managing loneliness and forming community and getting involved with people and feeling a sense of belonging. The shame and the stigma around sexuality diminishes, and sexuality feels kind of different for you then.
Yeah. I'm going to read, there's a message that's also come through, Dr. Eve. I know you and I think, have covered this in some of the topics we've dealt with before, but I want to raise it because this person seems to believe that because the wife has been masturbating secretly, maybe they've got a problem, or they also have an urge that they respond to. So the message says, good day, Clement and Dr. Eve. This topic is exactly what is happening to me. My wife secretly masturbates oftentimes and seem to enjoy that more than when we do sex. And I'm not sure if she's responding to any urge or uses it as an outlet, but I found out, and today I sent divorce papers to her. I feel betrayed and less of a man to fulfill her, leaving me with questions. What is the purpose for us to stay together?
Oh God, I feel so sad for that. It really aches me. So you hear the most important word that he's using there, Clement, which is I feel betrayed. And my work, as you know, is in betrayal trauma, working a lot with infidelity, secrecy, and this is what hurts more than the masturbation. So I think it's actually really quickly, I can just say, oftentimes, and it's real common, that partner sex for women is not that satisfying because of the silence, and because women don't always know what they really want, and because of the pre-orgasmia that women experience. And so women frequently will masturbate to be able to get the orgasm using a sex toy, or maybe chatting online to somebody else to do that, and the partner then finds out. So it could be they're not getting the kind of sex that they really enjoy, and they're not able to talk to their partner and tell their partner that. But it's more the feeling of betrayal, which is the absolutely hurtful part.
Yeah. Dr. Eve, thank you so much, as always, for always guiding us with so much grace through these important conversations. I really appreciate your time.
Loved seeing you. See you again soon.
Good to see you.